17th, 2025, and it's as good a day as ever to talk about how the United States was never meant to be a democracy. It was meant to be a republic. And throughout most of our history, we were a democratic republic, which allowed certain people to vote, certain people to not vote. That is still true. We still do actually have taxation without representation, as we have 16 and 17-year-olds with employment who are taxed and are not allowed to vote. Once you turn 18, you must register to vote. Additionally, we have a three-branch series of government. We have the executive branch, who is in charge of enforcing the laws. He's also the chief executive of the United States military. And we have a legislative branch, which is in charge of making the laws. And then we have the Justice Department or the Supreme Court, which is in charge of obviously applying the law and interpreting the law. Interestingly, interpreting the law was not the original point of the Justice Department. It was just enforcing and like being a court, like a regular court. Until James Madison got sued in 1803, and there was basically a thing that said that in the Constitution that said that if you are the president of the United States, or there was basically a rule that said if you're the president and you are going to be sued, you are automatically sued in the Supreme Court. The ruling was that the Supreme Court said no, that's your regular citizen, you're sued in regular court, and that established precedent of judicial review. Now, remember, Supreme Court justices and really everyone in the Justice Department is unelected, from the Attorney General to the Chief Justice to the clerks. Obviously, I don't care if the clerks are elected or not. Their job is to file paperwork. But the Supreme Court justices have lifetime appointments, meaning that if, for example, a 24-year-old fresh out of law school somehow gets appointed to the Supreme Court tomorrow, somehow, and lives for another 75 years until they're 99 years old, in the year 2100, they would still be on the Supreme Court unless they retired. And they can't be replaced unless they retire or die, or if they're impeached. Although I do believe that there hasn't been an impeachment of a Supreme Court justice in my life. Today, the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 in favor of the United States government and the Justice Department themselves, really, in favor of banning TikTok on Sunday, January 19th, one day before President Donald Trump's inauguration. And they ruled 9-0, which was surprising to me. I felt like they would maybe rule 5-4 either way, or say that there's going to be a stay or something, or the law can go into effect later. For those that don't know, the law basically said that TikTok owner ByteDance had to either stop operating the app in the United States by the 19th at midnight, so I think tomorrow night at midnight. I don't know. I don't exactly know, or if they meant the 20th, like when it turns to the 20th. I'm not 100% sure on that. I don't think they're 100% sure on that, unless they sold it to an American company. This law was, of course, lobbied for by people like Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, owners of Meta and the website formerly known as Twitter. Now, the court actually said at one point in one part of their ruling that they understand that it's a targeted ruling. So I don't understand how they didn't um, stop it based on free speech. But when you realize that we're not a democracy, the Supreme Court is not a democratically elected or even Republicanly elected body. It's a completely uh, well, it's honestly unelected rulers of the country who decide what the law means. And therefore, anytime somebody passes a law, there's unintended consequences if the Supreme Court has to interpret the law. And these are not unintended consequences, these are the intended consequences. But now that they've ruled in a free speech case in a way that they've never ruled before, we don't know what's going to happen. Additionally, YouTube and Meta have both said that they're going to stop fact checking things, despite that being the law in the European Union, because I'm pretty sure they think that as an American company they're above the law. But as soon as they start getting fined over in the European Union, it's going to be funny to see what happens. Now, do remember that as part of your First Amendment right, you have the right to free speech, freedom of religion, freedom from religion, freedom to petition the government, freedom of assembly, freedom to protest. All of those freedoms are the First Amendment. Use them. Contact the Supreme Court. Send letters. Contact your congressperson. Contact your senator. Send letters to Trump, honestly. Honestly, I think I might on Monday go down to the post office, buy 100 stamps and just send 100 letters to the White House, all that say the same thing. Because, like, could you imagine the amount of mail that Trump gets every day? Obviously, all the mail is, like, not read by him, but the more we send letters, send emails. Now, the reason I'm planning on doing the letters is because, like, post office is cool and I want the post office to do that. And also, I think it's funny to make that post office do work and just be like, yeah, imagine how much stuff would have to go to the White House. But it's very, very upsetting that the Supreme Court ruled this way, not simply because of, like, I use TikTok. I made money on TikTok over the course of the last couple years. It was where I had my most views with 68 million at one point in 2021, which was wonderful. But at this point, it's just time to wait. Now, the case that I'm talking about, um, Marbury v. Madison, the case established judicial review, which also allowed state courts to have the same power, which is why sometimes you'll see. Recently in New York, there was a case where New York ruled with a law, where New York court ruled that the law forcing internet service providers to provide $15 broadband for one speed and $20 broadband for another speed could proceed in New York only. Now, that does set precedent for other courts to look at and be like, oh, okay, let's take a look at that. But no, no, that's not something that we normally would see um, in terms of that. But if this were to go to the Supreme Court, they would have to sue in federal court, but it's not a federal law. And it's not regulating interstate commerce because it's only regulating internet service providers that operate in New York. But but remember, interstate commerce is something that the Supreme Court can. But the federal government's the only government that can rule on interstate commerce. Things like international or interstate train travel, interstate trucking, all of that. The federal government is the only one that can set regulations. You can have stricter regulations on commerce in your state. For example, in New York State, doubles are only allowed on designated truck routes, such as the New York State Thruway, in the state, and triples are not allowed. Those laws only apply to New York. New York has to follow the rules that say, oh, as a New Yorker or as a federal truck driving federally licensed truck driver, you're allowed to drive on our roads. We also recognize the driver's license of every other state for everyone because that's just common courtesy and not technically under interstate commerce, as far as I know, but it could be considered under interstate commerce. I'm surprised that there isn't another challenge to this ban under interstate commerce and free trade agreements between the United States, Canada, and Mexico, because TikTok does basically provide income to people across states, including through the TikTok shop where people move things from state to state. So I'm surprised on that, but I don't see the Supreme Court changing their opinion if somebody were to sue based on that. I do know that President Joe Biden said that he plans on um, punting the implementation of the ban of TikTok to the Trump administration, and that the TikTok CEO is planning on coming to the inauguration. So there's a million things that could happen, but ByteDance said that they're just going to take the U.S. servers offline and probably delete all of the data on Sunday, which I think is hilarious. Senator Tom Cotton called TikTok and ByteDance a communist spy app for refusing to sell to the Americans. And one of my friends on TikTok, Marianne, from KOTH Talk, and I don't actually know her YouTube channel, but if I find it, I will link it in the description. I may not find it. Um, Pointed this out that if Facebook went to China and China said we're banning you unless you sell it to China, would that make Facebook a communist spy app? No, I mean Facebook is a capitalist spy app. That actually, if you didn't know this about Facebook, it was actually founded by Zuckerberg while he was in college as a way to rank women and his female classmates. So yeah, if you're wondering why there's so much misogyny on Facebook, that's why. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll be still here on YouTube. I'm working on my Every Mariner's Ever series, as well as a series about the Bible. Potentially going to be doing some more stuff. I'm also planning on talking about the books I read, which actually I don't remember if I made a book about a video about the last book I read. Thanks. All right, everybody, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and you can follow me on Patreon for $1 a month. And Mariners recap videos will be published 12 to 14 hours before they'll be published on YouTube on there. You'll also have some access to things that I write, as well as some blog posts. I might use it as a website, and you can book me on Cameo. You can follow me on Instagram, and well as Blue Sky at Sammy5436. Thank you for watching.